Evidence secured at Marker 4. Advise command we are holding the scene.
Copy that. It's getting heavier out here.
Gerardo N, known as El Congo, sits in federal custody while his criminal empire burns around him. Captured hours ago, he holds a secret that could destroy the Jalisco New Generation Cartel following a 4-day murder spree. But his confession to investigators isn't about the murders he personally committed. He is revealing something far more significant: the massive fractures opening inside the world's most powerful criminal organization. The interrogator asks one direct question: why the violence? Why Uruapan? Why now? El Congo doesn't hesitate for a second. "Senor, they turned on us," he says. He isn't talking about the government or rivals. He's talking about the partners who were supposed to be allies. These criminal networks fought alongside the CJNG for years, sharing territory, coordinating operations, and shedding blood in the same trenches. According to reports from Animal Politico, those loyal allies have just become the cartel's greatest threat. El Congo specifically identified Los Viagras, a vicious criminal network operating out of the state of Michoacán. They once maintained a cooperative relationship with the CJNG, respecting the cartel's broader authority while controlling their own specific territories. But on February 22, 2026, the military killed Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes in Tapalpa, and that's when everything changed. Los Viagras smelled weakness and attacked. Now, 10 people are dead in Uruapan after only 4 days of fighting. Gunfire screams through the streets while bodies are left as warnings. Territory is being stolen, block by block. This isn't the government winning. This is the empire El Mencho built being torn apart by its own friends. 9 days after their leader died, the organization isn't struggling against external pressure. They are facing total betrayal. And what El Congo revealed in that interrogation room is only the very beginning. Fragmentation is accelerating across 5 key states. Regional commanders are competing, and the franchise system that made them powerful is finally shattering. The question isn't if the CJNG survives El Mencho. Can they even survive the next 30 days? They betrayed us. A captured leader reveals allies turned after El Mencho's death. Intro and subscribe. If you are following the chaos after El Mencho's death and want to understand how the CJNG is fracturing, subscribe and turn on notifications now. Every day brings new developments. We aren't witnessing a simple collapse, but something much more dangerous. We are watching a slow-motion explosion that could trigger years of violence as factions fight for control. Hit the like button if you believe understanding these criminal dynamics matters. El Congo's March 2nd confession provides a window into the chaos analysts predicted back on February 22nd. The empire is cracking. Who is betraying who, and what comes next? Why are former allies turning against the cartel? And what does this mean for Mexico's security over the coming months? To understand this betrayal, we need to revisit the events of February 22nd, 2026. Mexican forces and United States intelligence agents launched a massive raid in Tapalpa, Jalisco. Their target, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the supreme leader of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. A firefight erupted, leaving 4 CJNG operatives dead on the scene. 3 others, including El Mencho himself, were critically wounded and airlifted toward Mexico City. He died in transit from gunshot wounds to his chest, abdomen, and extremities. The Ministry of Defense confirmed his death that same day, and the cartel's retaliation across the country was immediate. 250 roadblocks paralyzed 20 states. Vehicles were torched and businesses were attacked. 25 National Guard members were killed, contributing to more than 70 total deaths during the wave of violence that followed. But that rage was directed at the government. Now, the violence has turned inward. 9 days later, former allies are no longer respecting the old boundaries. Regional commanders like El Congo are forced to fight wars on multiple fronts against the state and their former partners. They are battling the government, trying to dismantle the organization, and former partners trying to seize territory for themselves in this new reality. Who is El Congo? Gerardo N didn't appear in international headlines frequently before his arrest on March 2nd. He operated in Michoacán, specifically around Uruapan, a city of 350,000 people in the state's west. Uruapan sits deep within Tierra Caliente, the infamous hot land. Multiple criminal factions have fought over this ground for several decades. It holds massive value near Pacific trade routes for cooking synthetic methamphetamine. Following his recent capture, the government released specific details about him. El Congo commanded CJNG operations, managing local hitmen and coordinating allies. He guarded territorial lines and ensured the cartel's local business remained untouched. He wasn't the top boss or one of the 4 regional commanders. Yet, he wielded enough power to command men and issue orders. He knew every secret on the street and every move being made. When he talked after his March arrest, the entire underworld felt it. On March 2, 2026, federal agents captured Gerardo N, alias El Congo. Prosecutors officially charged him for murdering local regional official named Carlos Manzo. But his arrest happened during a massive wave of escalating citywide violence. Local media reports from Animal Politico say the war started February 26. Just 4 days after El Mencho died, Uruapan became a literal graveyard. By El Congo's arrest on March 2, 10 people were already dead. 2 others were wounded. Was this just a streak of random crime? Hardly. During his interrogation, El Congo explained exactly why the blood flowed. He claimed the war wasn't against feds or the rival Sinaloa Cartel. This was a violent fallout with groups who were once their partners. He used a very specific term, voltaire. In English, it means turning. They turned on us, he said. Their own brothers became their executioners. He identified the traitors as Los Viagras, a ruthless Michoacán-based organization. They formed from broken factions and spent years running drugs and extortion. For years, Los Viagras and the CJNG maintained a very profitable alliance. They were separate groups, but they worked together whenever the money was right. They respected each other's borders and kept the peace to maximize profits. That deal held because El Mencho's cartel was simply too dangerous to cross. But on February 22, when El Mencho died, the math changed forever. According to El Congo, Los Viagras saw that death as a green light. They assumed the CJNG would fracture and leave their lucrative territories unprotected. So they turned, attacking Uruapan while El Congo fought to hold the line. That betrayal caused 10 deaths in 4 days and turned streets into battlefields. This is what the death of a king looks like in real time. It isn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, bloody rot of former friendships. The allies are turning into enemies. Is the entire empire falling apart? To see why Los Viagras struck now, we must examine El Mencho's structure. Organized crime expert Oscar Malamud recently broke down how the cartel functioned. The CJNG used a franchise model instead of controlling every single town directly. They allowed smaller local criminal gangs to officially affiliate with their brand. These groups used the CJNG name to strike fear into their local rivals. They gained access to international drug pipelines and massive money laundering networks. In return, they paid a cut and followed the boss's specific rules. They fought for strategic goals and bowed to El Mencho's ultimate word. But that loyalty wasn't about love. It was a cold, hard business calculation. The heir to this billion-dollar empire is currently rotting in a United States prison cell. El Mencho commanded respect through logistical brilliance. He proved he would use horrific violence against any person who challenged his power. In 2015, his men used a rocket to down a military helicopter. The coordinated attacks across 20 states after he died sent an even louder message. That message was, do not test us. We have the reach and the money. We have the will to kill. But here is the problem with a kingdom built on fear. When the kingpin finally drops, and the person who commanded that fear is gone, the subordinates start doing their own math. They ask, is the new boss strong? Will the organization stay coordinated? Or is this the moment of total vulnerability? For rival crews like Los Viagras, this moment of doubt is their biggest opportunity. The founder is dead, and the throne is empty. The son, El Manito, is serving life in an American federal prison. The stepson, El Pelon, lacks the battlefield history to command the same level of respect El Mencho did. Regional commanders are now fighting each other instead of staying united behind a single leader. From the perspective of Los Viagras, this is the time to strike. They must hit before the cartel finds footing. They have to move before the organization adapts to the post-El Mencho world. Strike now. Seize the land and present them with a done deal. We hold these streets. You are not getting them back. If you want to fight for them, you will pay in blood. That logic explains the slaughter in Uruapan. It explains why El Congo sounded so broken when he admitted the lines were overrun. It explains why analysts warned the weeks after his death would be the most dangerous period for potential fragmentation. The betrayal in Uruapan is everywhere. Let us look at the specific evidence of what is happening there. According to local news in Michoacán, the violence erupted on Thursday, February 26th. That was 4 days after the boss died. Enough time for the shock to settle. Enough time to mobilize the killers. On that Thursday, February 26th, the war began. Armed squads hit several neighborhoods. Locals reported heavy gunfire and vehicles screaming through the streets. On Friday, more bodies appeared. On Saturday, the gun battles were constant and unrelenting. Violence continued through Sunday. By Monday, when police arrested El Congo, the death toll reached 10 people killed and 2 wounded in territorial disputes. Think about that. 10 human lives extinguished in 4 days. Make no mistake, this is not a government operation. This is internal competition turning bloody. Uruapan is not some minor outpost. It is a city of 350,000 people and a vital economic hub for the region. Controlling Uruapan means owning the trafficking routes and the local extortion money. For the cartel to lose this city, or even be forced to fight for it, is a massive blow. It tells every other affiliate that the cartel is weak. That starts a cascade. If Los Viagras can win here, what stops others from doing the same thing? What stops groups in Guanajuato or Baja California from deciding to go independent? Why share profits with a central command that can no longer enforce the rules of the game? This is how an empire dissolves. One successful betrayal encourages the next one. Every loss makes the organization look vulnerable. Under the old boss, they were untouchable. Now, they look like prey. The 5-state war breaking out is not some fluke. Politico MX reported on March 2nd that the cartel is facing a total reconfiguration. They are facing massive challenges across 5 key states where they hold power. First, let's look at Jalisco. This is their home base and their headquarters. This is where they run their production labs and their massive financial networks. They have spent years operating here with total impunity through political corruption. Losing Jalisco would end the cartel. But now, even in their own backyard, people are questioning them. With the boss gone, who actually controls the vital infrastructure? Who manages the corrupt officials? Who decides what gets produced and sold? The king is dead, and his empire is already rotting. If regional commanders in Jalisco choose internal war over unity, the organization's core will finally fracture. Next, we have Michoacán. Just as we saw in Uruapan, Michoacán is currently exploding with violence, as former allies challenge CJNG control. But Michoacán represents more than just the city of Uruapan. This state is El Mencho's own birthplace. He entered the world in 1966, in Aguilia, located within the Tierra Caliente region of Michoacán. The territory is strategically vital due to its Pacific coast access, allowing drugs made in Michoacán to reach global markets through Lázaro Cárdenas. The CJNG cannot endure the loss of Michoacán, yet holding it requires winning simultaneous wars against groups like Los Viagras, who see a power vacuum, and then there is Guanajuato. Guanajuato, situated in central Mexico, has earned its reputation as one of the most violent battlegrounds over the last few years. The CJNG has been trapped in a grueling, long-term conflict with the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel. This local group focuses heavily on large-scale fuel theft, and that specific struggle has been nothing short of brutal. Guanajuato consistently tops Mexico's lists for violence because of this war. But with El Mencho dead, the balance of power here is now uncertain. If the CJNG looks weak, Santa Rosa de Lima will likely ramp up attacks to reclaim every inch of contested territory. Fourth is Sinaloa. Sinaloa is the base for the Sinaloa Cartel, the CJNG's main national rival, though their history is deeply complicated. Reports suggest the CJNG actually formed a tactical alliance with Los Chapitos, the sons of the infamous Wayne El Chapo Guzman. This alliance saw the CJNG and Los Chapitos join forces to fight the La Maiza faction, led by Ismael Elmo Zambada's loyalists. That deal allowed the CJNG to operate inside Sinaloa state. But in the cartel world, all alliances are merely business transactions. These deals only last as long as both sides profit. With El Mencho dead, will Los Chapitos still see any reason to cooperate? Or will they decide they can handle La Maiza alone, and that purging the CJNG from Sinaloa is their best long-term move? If Los Chapos turns on the CJNG, and that alliance breaks, the organization loses its foothold in Mexico's most strategic state. Fifth is Baja California. Baja California, and specifically the Tijuana corridor, serves as the essential gateway for smuggling into the United States. The CJNG moved into Baja California by partnering with factions of the Tijuana Cartel, also known as the Arellano Felix organization. These pacts gave the CJNG the border routes necessary to move product into the highly profitable American market. But again, the survival of these critical partnerships depends entirely on whether they outlive El Mencho's death. If Tijuana cartel factions choose to work with rivals or go independent, the CJNG's access to the border is effectively cut off. Across Jalisco, Michoacán, Guanajuato, Sinaloa, and Baja California, the CJNG is now facing a total existential crisis. Some active wars are already raging in places like Uruapan, while other vital alliances are currently teetering on the edge of collapse. The pattern is undeniable. The loss of a single central authority figure has plunged the entire operation into deep uncertainty. This uncertainty is an invitation for rivals and former partners to test every boundary and challenge the CJNG's waning control. They are moving to seize whatever they can during this transition. Let's break down exactly what is at stake in these territories. In Jalisco, the CJNG operates massive infrastructure, including hidden laboratories that process precursor chemicals imported from China and other Asian sources. Their distribution networks move these narcotics from the labs to trafficking routes heading toward the United States or Pacific shipping ports. If the CJNG loses its grip on Jalisco because regional commanders start fighting, the entire supply chain could face a total breakdown. We aren't talking about total destruction, but a massive disruption. Rival commanders would likely begin a violent struggle over who owns which specific production laboratory. Output would plummet during the fighting, and quality would drop if the lead chemists and managers are killed or flee. In Michoacán, the strategic value of the Tierra Caliente region extends far beyond the borders of Uruapan. This agricultural land has been the primary source for marijuana and opium poppy cultivation for several generations. It is also where synthetic drug manufacturing has exploded recently, all connected to Pacific Coast access through Michoacán. The port of Ro Cardenas is the vital link for bringing in the raw chemicals needed to make methamphetamine and fentanyl. It is equally important for moving the cocaine that the CJNG gets from its various South American suppliers. If the CJNG loses Michoacán to Los Viagras or other local factions, they lose their manufacturing hub and their logistics. They would be stripped of both their massive production capacity and their most direct access to international smuggling routes. In Guanajuato, the war against Santa Rosa de Lima isn't about drugs. It is a battle for control of fuel theft. Guanajuato is the site of major pipelines that transport gasoline and diesel from refineries to the rest of the country. Illegally tapping these lines to sell stolen fuel, a practice known as hachikiko, generates a staggering amount of revenue. Imagine a war zone where homicide rates rival combat theaters, all over control of fuel theft networks. In Guanajuato, the AMG and Santa Rosa de Lima have fought for these networks for many years. If Santa Rosa de Lima senses the CJNG is stumbling, they will launch a massive offensive to seize control. That would mean losing territory and a revenue stream worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But what about Sinaloa? In Sinaloa, the stakes involve the balance of Mexico's entire drug landscape, not just mere territory. Even while fractured into factions, the Sinaloa Cartel remains the most established and well-connected organization in the country. The CJNG is losing its alliance with Los Chapitos. If forced out of Sinaloa entirely, it loses its grip on a state that has been the heart of Mexican drug trafficking for generations. It loses access to smuggling routes, deep corruption networks, and infrastructure built over decades. The message is clear. The CJNG is no longer expanding. It is shrinking. In Baja California, specifically Tijuana, the border infrastructure is the only thing that matters. Tijuana-San Diego is among the world's busiest crossings, with millions of people and vehicles crossing every single year. That massive volume creates smuggling opportunities that are simply unmatched anywhere else on the planet. Whoever controls Tijuana controls the gates to Southern California, one of the biggest drug markets in America. Losing Tijuana would be an absolute strategic catastrophe for the CJNG. These 5 state challenges are not minor adjustments. We are talking about losing critical infrastructure and massive revenue. These assets would fundamentally change the CJNG's position in Mexico. And that is when the government finally pounced. The authorities are striking now while the CJNG is at its absolute weakest. As the cartel handles internal betrayals and collapsing alliances, the Mexican government is not sitting idle. Authorities are exploiting this moment of vulnerability to target the CJNG's remaining leadership and infrastructure. Reports from Infobae on March 2 show multiple significant arrests occurred just days after El Mencho's death. Let's look at the most critical case, the 11 police officers in Ecuandurio, Michoacán. Around March 2, 11 municipal police officers were arrested in Ecuandurio, a small town in Michoacán. These charges are stunning. We aren't talking about beat cops taking small bribes to look away. These officers, including the Director of Public Security himself, were actually working directly for the CJNG. According to the Michoacán State Prosecutor's Office, these officers were caught in masks and hoods, using official police vehicles to carry out orders for the cartel. Investigators found drugs, cartel insignias, and most damningly, cell phones with group chats, where officers reported every movement of federal security forces to their cartel bosses. They warned about military operations and roadblocks, providing the intelligence needed to dodge government actions. 10 of the 11 arrested officers were originally from Jalisco, not the local area of Michoacán. This detail suggests the cartel planted them in those roles, rather than corrupting local officers after the fact. This is narco payroll in action. Criminal organizations placing their own people into official security positions or corrupting officers so thoroughly they function as full-time cartel employees. The Ecuandurio arrests reveal a terrifying reality. Even while facing internal fractures, the CJNG still maintains deep corruption networks in local government. But those networks are being dismantled now, because the cartel is too weak to protect its assets. What do these Ecuandurio arrests tell us? Look at the scale. 11 officers. That isn't one corrupt cop. That is the systematic penetration of an entire municipal police force. When the Director of Public Security is on the payroll, the organization meant to protect citizens is actually working for the enterprise, terrorizing them. Look at their operational roles. These men were not passive. They were active participants in cartel operations. The WhatsApp groups on their phones proved they were feeding real-time intelligence to the enemy. When Mexican military convoys moved toward Ecuandurio, these officers sent the alert. When state police planned roadblocks, these officers warned the cartel, acting as an early warning system. They moved personnel and contraband before the raids, positioning hitmen to ambush federal security forces. Here is the shocker. 10 of the 11 arrested officers were originally from Jalisco. These weren't local Michoacán cops. They were deliberate plants, meaning CJNG didn't just bribe the Ecuandurio police. They brought in their own people from Jalisco, issued them police credentials, and ran a cartel unit in uniform. This is high-level organizational behavior. It requires planning. It takes massive influence with city leaders, To secure official police positions for active cartel hitmen, it requires constant management to ensure these men follow cartel orders instead of their official roles. Fourth, the timing of these arrests, coming days after El Mencho's death, suggests authorities identified these officers but waited to strike. When CJNG was at full strength, arresting 11 municipal police officers might have triggered a violent retaliation. The cartel might have attacked the facilities where the officers were held. They could have threatened prosecutors or burned government buildings. But with CJNG weakened and fighting Los Viagras, the calculation has changed. The risk of massive retaliation is lower, so authorities strike, arresting the corrupt officers and exposing the entire network. They remove cartel assets from positions of official authority and send a message. The protection you once enjoyed is finally eroding. The infrastructure you built is being dismantled, and we are coming for the rest. The Awandero arrests are no isolated case. They represent a pattern. Broader reporting on CJNG corruption networks reveals the organization spent years building relationships with officials at the municipal, state, and even federal levels. Mayors allow cartel operations in their towns for bribes or because of threats against their own families. Prosecutors decline to pursue cases against cartel members or leak sensitive information about ongoing investigations to the boss. Judges dismiss charges, reduce sentences, or grant favorable rulings for the organization. Prison officials allow CJNG leaders to continue running their operations from behind the bars. They facilitate outside communication while providing luxury accommodations and special privileges to inmates. All this corruption exists because CJNG, under El Mencho's leadership, had the resources to pay bribes and the will to kill anyone refusing to cooperate. But maintaining those corruption networks requires ongoing investment and money for bribes. You need muscle to threaten those who might defect and the organizational capacity to manage relationships with hundreds of corrupted officials. When the organization is weakened and resources are diverted to fight former allies, some of these networks start to fray. Officials who cooperated because of fear might calculate that the organization is no longer strong enough to follow through on threats. Officials who were cooperating for pay might find that payments are delayed as the financial situation becomes more uncertain. As those corruption networks finally weaken, the Mexican government's ability to operate against the cartel improves. Operations once compromised by leaks now have a better chance of succeeding because the rats are staying quiet. Investigations that would have been sabotaged by corrupt prosecutors can now move forward, creating a compounding effect where weakness leads to reduced corruption capacity. Shrinking corruption networks lead to more successful government operations against the cartel. More successful operations further weaken CJNG. It is a negative cycle for the cartel, and breaking it requires strong central leadership that can enforce discipline. They must maintain financial flows and demonstrate enough strength to keep officials in line. Which brings us back to the succession question. Can El Pelon or another leader provide that kind of authority? Or will the organization continue to weaken as networks fray and government pressure intensifies? Second, the relentless arrests of regional cartel commanders continue. Reporting from Infobae, which compiled data from the first week after El Mencho's death, confirms multiple operatives were arrested. Isaac Moreno Romero, alias El Hacha, a regional operator captured in Tlaxcala. Authorities accuse him of managing kidnapping, extortion, and fuel theft. Meanwhile, the two bodyguards detained during the Tapalpa operation are now in custody. They were sent to the federal maximum security prison known as Altiplano. 13 individuals arrested in Jalisco immediately after the February 22 violence are charged with burning vehicles and blocking roads. They fired on agents during strikes, but each arrest dismantles their structure. Meanwhile, a $5 million bounty targets their potential California-born leader. Normally, back when the organization stood as a monolith and Elena still breathed, they would have stormed every prison facility to liberate their captured brothers through sheer tactical and violent force. They would have hunted the judges until every legal case against them vanished from the record. But today, crippled by infighting and the war with Los Viagras, their capacity to push back against government pressure has completely evaporated. Mexico sees this blood in the water. Omar Garcia Haruch says the government is ready to strike at the cartel now. Authorities have already pinpointed the men waiting to step into the massive void that Elno left behind him. On February 27th, Garcia Haruch claimed they have identified 4 high-level leaders who are already under active investigation. 2 specific individuals are favorites to replace El Mencho in the Jalisco Cartel, and investigators are closing in. He kept names secret, but the subtext was clear. We are watching your every move from the shadows. We see you. You are next. This creates a lethal succession trap for them. Anyone claiming the throne becomes the primary target for the United States and Mexican law enforcement agencies immediately. It is a suicide mission. Regional commanders are terrified to lead because taking the crown puts a dangerous, giant red target on their backs for everyone to see. But if no one leads, the entire organization drifts into total chaos and fragmentation. The cartel is shattering into pieces with no clear strategic solution in sight for the bosses today. Dice mentions the 4 potential successors in Jera. Although Garcia Haruch stayed silent, Insight crime analysts have successfully identified the candidates. These are the men who could inherit the bloodiest and most powerful criminal empire on the planet. Let us examine who they might be now. First is Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, or El Pelon and El 3. He is Mencho's stepson and Rosalinda's biological son. He is the ultimate insider. According to the United States National Counterterrorism Center's latest intelligence reports and briefings, El Pelon was the de facto second-in-command the moment that El Mencho took his very last breath. Born in Santa Ana in 1984, he is an official United States citizen today. Washington wants him enough to pay $5 million for him. El Pelon is the most logical structural successor. He controls the money. He knows the global players. He has the structural pedigree to rule the whole group. But can he actually fight? Analysts like David Saido argue El Pelon lacks the scars and the deep loyalty of the frontline battlefield commanders throughout Mexico. To the shooters, he is a family insider who inherited a crown he never actually bled for in the streets. If the commanders revolt, the cartel burns. Is there someone better? Next is Arias Flores Silva, or El Cardenero, a key figure according to reporting cited by El Financiero. El Cardenero brokered the peace with Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo in the powerful and rival Sinaloa Cartel faction. That makes him a very skilled diplomat. He has the reach and the political mind to look beyond the immediate cartel borders. If the next boss needs to build a coalition, El Cardenero is the perfect and tough architect for the job. But then, the question is whether he has the operational credibility and capacity for the absolute brutality required to successfully crush any who resist. Then there is Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, known as Dolar. He leads one of the cartel's most elite hit squads. He runs the shooters. He owns the streets. He uses violence to maintain control over the territory. He is the hammer. In a time of war, a tactical leader like Dolar could scare rivals and former allies back into submission and deter challenges. But winning a gunfight is not the same as running a global multi-billion-dollar criminal empire. He knows how to kill, but does he know how to properly manage international drug trafficking and complex financial networks? Managing corruption and diplomacy requires a broad skill set that tactical commanders often lack in this brutal world successfully. Finally, there are the ghost commanders, the regional bosses who own the territory but hide their faces. They rule specific states with iron fists and their own powerful, loyal private armies. They have the cash. But do they have the vision? 70-plus people were slaughtered across 20 states in a single week following the death of the kingpin. Every commander has built a private army and bought off local officials, waiting for this exact moment. Any one of these lieutenants could now make a desperate play for the throne. They might choose to run their sectors semi-independently while keeping the CJNG brand on the door, but in reality, they would be operating their own private empires. Garcia Haruch stated that authorities have pinpointed 4 powerful leaders, 2 specifically, which proves that Mexican intelligence has a crystal-clear map of who the primary contenders are. But knowing the candidates is a world away from knowing the winner. because succession in these cartels isn't decided by a vote. It is settled by who can command the most fear, who enforces the brutal discipline, and who shows the most strength. You need raw force and elite strategy to hold a fractured empire together, and that bloody process takes months to resolve. Until then, the organization is wide open to the exact betrayals and territorial wars we are witnessing right now in Uruapan. So, what does it truly mean when a partner decides to turn? Let's go back to the words of El Congo. Se nos volaron, they turned on us. They betrayed us. That phrase reveals the cold, black heart of how these syndicates function. In the world of the cartels, loyalty isn't about some shared ideology or a deep belief in a cause. It is purely transactional. It is based on a balance of mutual profit and the fear of total destruction. These groups only cooperate when they know that challenging the other side would be too expensive in blood and money. Alliances survive only as long as the benefits of peace outweigh the gains of war. But when the math changes, when the boss looks weak and the cost of a coup drops, that fake loyalty evaporates into thin air. Los Viagras didn't flip on CJNG because they had a change of heart. They did it because CJNG without El Mencho is vulnerable. They made a move because they believe they can finally seize the territory they've always wanted. That land would have been way too dangerous to touch before, but now the prize of Uruapan is worth the risk. And here is the most brutal reality of the situation. Los Viagras might actually be right. If CJNG is fighting Los Viagras in Michoacán, while also dodging heavy government heat across 20 different states, and simultaneously trying to hold on to their shaky alliances in places like Sinaloa and Baja California, they might not have the muscle left to crush Los Viagras. They might have to just accept losing those territories. This is exactly what the fragmentation of a massive criminal superpower looks like. It isn't one giant explosion. It's a slow, painful erosion. A lost city here, a broken alliance there, a lieutenant defecting elsewhere. Each individual loss seems manageable when you look at it in isolation, but cumulatively, they turn a unified empire into a collection of local gangs that just happen to share a name. But we can't ignore the human cost. Amid all this talk of power dynamics and strategy, we must remember the victims. 10 people were murdered in Uruapan in just 4 days. Those aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are human beings with families. Maybe some were involved in the life of crime, but others were likely innocent people caught in a crossfire they didn't choose, leaving behind a trail of destroyed families. Children are losing their parents while parents bury their children, and Uruapan is only one small part of the map. Reports from the week immediately following the death of El Mencho state that more than 70 people were killed. If this fragmentation accelerates and the retaliatory violence spreads across 20 states, that body count is going to skyrocket. If former allies keep turning on each other and border disputes turn into long wars, the death toll will be massive. Entire communities will be held hostage. Small businesses will be extorted. Thousands of people will be forced to flee. This is the true price of a cartel falling apart. It's easy to focus on the big strategic moves. Who will take over the CJNG? Will they stay whole or shatter? How will the other cartels react? But those questions are answered in the lives of ordinary people who have zero connection to the drug trade. When the hitmen from Los Viagras and CJNG start shooting for control of the streets in Uruapan, the people caught in the middle didn't ask for this war. They're just trying to survive, yet they pay the price. So, where do we go from here? 9 days after the death of El Mencho, the situation is completely unpredictable. The CJNG hasn't folded yet. They are still a functioning organization. They still hold on to massive amounts of land. They still have thousands of foot soldiers, and they are still making billions of dollars in the drug trade. But they are facing a crisis they've never seen. Their oldest allies are now their deadliest enemies. The government is hunting their remaining leaders. The succession is a mess, and every rival is now testing their armor. Within 6 months, the most powerful criminal empire on Earth could simply vanish into thin air. We begin with the possibility of a brutal consolidation under a new iron fist. El Palalán, or another rival successor, successfully grabs the reins of power. Local bosses fall in line, perhaps with gritted teeth, because they recognize that a civil war destroys the bottom line for everyone involved in the trade. This new world requires a new playbook. The cartel rewrites its internal laws to survive life in the post-Elno reality. They cut deals that let regional captains run their own shows, while still flying the corporate flag under a central leadership. Traitors like Los Viagras get a choice: submit to the new order or face total annihilation through coordinated strikes. The signal to any other would-be rebels is unmistakable. Challenging the throne carries a price tag no one wants to pay. They prove they still have the muscle to bury anyone who jumps ship. But can they hold the line against an external onslaught? Yes, they can. Zuja survives as one piece bruised and slightly smaller than its peak under El Mencho, but it remains a top-tier titan in the Mexican underworld. In this version of the future, the bloodletting in Uruapan is just growing pains, a brutal phase of testing before the new status quo sets in. By mid-2026, the organization has consolidated and returned to something resembling its previous operational capacity. Is this actually going to happen? It is a coin flip. It depends on El Pelon proving himself immediately and whether the captains decide that being together makes them richer. Then there is the scorched earth option: total collapse. No single leader emerges with enough authority to command loyalty from all regional commanders. The empire shatters into multiple independent groups fighting over the scraps of their former territory. Some keep the CJNG name for the fear it inspires, even if the central command is dead. Others rebrand entirely, creating new organizations with new names for their personal wars. Los Viagras could successfully carve out their own kingdoms in old cartel lands and refuse to ever be reabsorbed. They become the new law in Uruapan and the hills beyond. Federal forces will smell blood and move in for the kill, while coordination is dead. Without a general, the soldiers have no plan to respond. Within 6 months, the unified organization effectively ceases to exist. 4 or 5 smaller, hungrier networks take over the ruins of what was once a single empire. Jalisco-based crews lock down drug production and local street sales. Michoacán-based groups operate as their own independent masters. The Sinaloa alliance dies. Los Chapitos turn their back on the chaos to finish their own war with La Maiza. This path leads to a massive spike in murders, as every corner becomes a front line for factions fighting for control. Innocent people die. The local economy chokes as shops board up their windows and businesses relocate. Eventually, over 18 months, the dust finally settles into a new, fractured peace between multiple players. They might work together if there is money to be made, but the empire is gone forever. Or is there a middle ground? This total breakup happens if succession turns into a bloodbath, and if allies succeed in taking land without facing retaliation. That brings us to Scenario 3, the rise of the regional warlords. This is the most realistic path. They keep the name and they keep El Pelon or another central figure at the top of the letterhead. Their propaganda claims they are still a united front, but on the ground, the captains are operating with significant autonomy. They rule their own turf. They make their own local decisions. The local bosses keep most of the revenue and send a small percentage to the boss just to pay lip service. They attend the meetings and they coordinate when it pays. But they are essentially running their own organizations, wearing the CJNG brand. The organization becomes more like a franchise network than a centralized empire, with top-down command and control. If this is the future, certain areas stay relatively quiet because the local warlords have enough muscle to keep everyone in line. Jalisco stays solid as the heartland, but everywhere else becomes a permanent war zone. Michoacán stays bloody as Los Viagras and other groups keep pushing for more ground. Guanajuato turns into a permanent battlefield as the war with Santa Rosa de Lima drags on with no resolution. The alliance with Sinaloa is just paper. Los Chapitos help out when it pays, but they are playing their own game now. The global drug flow does not stop because those deals are managed at the regional level anyway. The meth and fentanyl keep moving because the routes stay open and the profit is just too high. Even as the kingpin falls, the drug pipelines into America haven't missed a beat. But the cartel's terrifying ability to paralyze entire cities with 250 simultaneous roadblocks died with its leader. Regional bosses simply won't waste their own soldiers or cash on wars that offer no direct profit for their territory. What are the odds this happens? It is almost a certainty. Think of it as a middle ground between total control and a messy, violent explosion. This lets local commanders keep their private fiefdoms while waving the brand for clout. But a darker fourth option looms. Option 4. A total takeover or absorption. A predator cartel senses this weakness and moves to swallow the territory and the men. The most obvious candidate is Sinaloa. Despite the internal war between Los Chapitos and the Maiza, that criminal machine stays incredibly resilient. It survived El Chapo's life sentence. If Sinaloa or other giants decide to wipe CJNG off the map, they will launch a blitz for every single plaza. They will buy off the lieutenants who want to live and simply consume what remains of the organization. In this version of the story, CJNG doesn't break apart. It is conquered. The territory gets carved up, members flip or die, and the 4 letters vanish within 1 year. Is this likely? It is a long shot, but not impossible. Conquest demands perfect coordination among rivals and triggers a level of violence that forces a massive government response. The path taken depends on secrets hidden inside the cartel, but the fallout will hit your front door. What happens to this group matters far beyond the immediate streets where the cartel actually operates. Federal agencies identify CJNG as a primary pipeline for the fentanyl currently flooding American streets. Fentanyl kills tens of thousands annually and is a synthetic killer many times more powerful than heroin. This chemical has fueled an addiction crisis that has gutted families and communities across America. If they split, will the fentanyl dry up, or will regional bosses just keep the labs running under a different flag, even without a central command? The reality is the latter. The billions generated by synthetic opioids ensure the trade continues, regardless of who is sitting in charge. A split might make things worse, as smaller groups ramp up production to fund their more violent territory wars. A flood of supply could crash street prices, making the drug even more accessible and deadly. The cartel also controls gas theft, illegal mining, extortion, timeshare fraud, and human smuggling. If the center breaks, these rackets just find new bosses. Will the violence decrease as a result? From a public health perspective, the death of CJNG offers no immediate relief for the average person. The suffering doesn't stop. It just spreads among 5 competing groups instead of one unified organization. For the leaders in Mexico City, this chaos presents both a unique opportunity and a nightmare. A fractured enemy is much easier for a government to bully than a single, unified narco state. 10 small gangs cannot easily shut down 250 highways in a single afternoon like the old organization did. But the catch is that a power vacuum leads to bodies piling up as gangs fight for the crown. Mexico might not actually want to see the total destruction of CJNG. Their goal is a managed collapse that keeps the civilian body count from sparking an international outcry. That balance is gone. The real war has just begun. On March 2, 2026, a commander called El Congo was interrogated in federal custody. His confession reveals a chilling truth that analysts have warned about since February 22. Sir, they have betrayed us. These weren't strangers. They were partners who shared territory and moved shipments with CJNG for many years. Now they are predators taking territory, starting with Los Viagras in Uruapan. The sharks are circling. Los Chapitos, Tijuana factions, and the Santa Rosa de Lima cartel are all moving. Every one of them is asking if CJNG is still strong enough to defend an empire without El Mencho. The proof is in Uruapan, where 10 bodies fell in 4 days, showing a cartel that is clearly struggling. They are fighting wars on every front against the state, against their former friends, and against themselves. 9 days after El Mencho's death, the 15-year empire he built faces a secret threat that no one ever saw coming. Will they unite under new leadership? Or will everything shatter as former allies start seizing territory for themselves? We won't find the truth in press releases. The real story is written in blood on the streets of Uruapan. Regional commanders are choosing now. Do they swear loyalty to El Pelon or strike out on their own? Former partners are weighing the cost. deciding if the payout is worth the risk of fighting the CJNG. The Mexican government is waiting to pounce, even though they know the resulting chaos could burn everything down. The foundation is cracking, leaving us to wonder if they can patch the holes or if it all collapses. In Uruapan, families wait. In Michoacán, Jalisco, Guanajuato, Sinaloa, and Baja California, people wait for the next blow. Their lives depend on whether this settles quickly or turns into total war. Right now, the first blow has landed. The inner circle just committed the ultimate betrayal, forcing an invincible organization to fight for its survival. Do you want to see what happens next? Subscribe and turn on notifications to track what happens to the CJNG over the coming months, because this story is far from over. Every single day brings more arrests, more street violence, and massive shifts in who holds the actual power. Share this with anyone who needs the truth about Mexico, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. Will they survive this transition, or are we watching the final days of a unified CJNG right now? These next 30 days are the critical moment determining if the organization survives, whole or fractures into something else entirely. Betrayals have started. The war for succession is officially underway. Across 5 different states, the future of the world's most dangerous criminal organization hangs by a single thread.